Afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I was going to do an interview with the guy. I came down here to do it next to the river, but he never messaged me. So I was just sitting here reading some articles, and I came across a Dr. Lacy Hunt interview from back in July, I believe is what it was. And I'll leave a link down in the description for you guys. It's all in text. It's not really that long. It's fairly short, but there were some pretty interesting things to say that he had to say in there. And one of the things that I really like about Dr. Lacy Hunt is that he's one of the few economists out there who has been a major voice for the deflationary scenario. Like, everybody out there is screaming inflation, inflation, inflation. Dr. Lacy Hunt is one of the few people who says no, deflation is the bigger concern. And really, he describes it down to the type of debt that we have. I mean, it's the debt, the interest rates, the money velocity. There's a lot of working parts in there that bring us to the inflation scenario, or at least a hyperinflation scenario. And he doesn't see that taking place here in the future on the account of the type of debt that we have. Now, interest rates are really low, and that has something to do with it. But really what it comes down to is the type of debt that we are taking out. And he calls it a double-edged sword, because what it is the debt is, and let me see if I can say it the way he said it. It increases current spending in exchange for future spending, and unless it generates an income stream that is paying back the principal and interest, you're going to see that money velocity continue to slow. And now there's a lot kind of being said in there, but I guess the easiest way to kind of describe it is that if you are going to borrow money, that money that you borrow, whatever you spend it on, needs to be able to pay back the loan and generate an income after that in order for the money velocity to pick up. So, for example, like what he's trying to say, and at least from what I understand it, is that if a farmer takes out a loan, buys a tractor, that tractor should work the fields, make more, product, vegetables, whatever it is the farmer's growing. The farmer can sell ever more product and be able to pay back the loan for the tractor plus the interest that he has for the loan that he had taken out. And that money is then profitable, is there for picking up the money velocity. Instead, what's happening is that people are taking out this money and then spending it on a consumer item, and that whatever it is that they're spending it on doesn't generate an income. It doesn't generate back the principal plus the interest. So this is like bad debt that's being taken out. It doesn't generate any kind of income back into the economy. Another way to kind of look at it is that with interest rates as low as they are, if an individual has $1 million, you're sitting on $1 million cash, and you go back to the early 80s and you bought 10-year treasuries, you all of a sudden you inherited $1 million, you go and you buy 10-year treasuries, every year you would be paid $150,000 for loaning the government money. They had 10-15% interest on 50% yields on 10-year treasuries back then. So that money could be spent back into the economy. But now, you inherit $1 million, you go and you buy 10-year treasuries with it, and you're going to get paid, well, today you're going to get a little bit better than you did 6 months ago, but you're still around, $12,000, $13,000 a year? That's not a whole lot of return for $1 million to be lent out, to only get $13,000 a year. See, back in the early 80s, you would get $150,000. Back in the early 80s, that was a pretty decent life. Now, $150,000 is to me, it's an insane amount of money, but when you go and you look at the price of houses and cars and life and stuff, $150,000 isn't that much money anymore. So all this money that goes into investment is not getting the return. All this debt is going into consumption and not going into productive investments that will bring a return back to the economy. It just basically sucks it away. Then you have to work ever harder and do with less in order to pay back that consumer debt, because there's nothing out there that's generating an income from it. So that's what I see happening here in the future. They can print up as much money as they want. It's not going to cause inflation to pick up so long as it's going into this consumer debt. It's going to cause, money velocity to drop. Now, what he does say would cause inflation, and this is really interesting because I never really heard anybody else talk about it in this way, but he says if the Fed's liabilities, the Federal Reserve's liabilities became legal tender. And I thought, well, aren't the Fed liabilities already legal tender? I mean, this is what I thought was the Fed's liabilities, right? Were these Federal Reserve notes. They're considered the Fed's liabilities, but this isn't what Dr. Lacy Hunt is talking about, the Fed's liabilities being legal tender. It's legal tender for us to use. What he's talking about is the Federal Reserve not lending money into the system, but buying, straight up buying things. And there's a difference there because the Federal Reserve can only lend into the economy. They can buy like the mortgage-backed securities and they can buy government debt, but essentially that's still loaning money into the system. They're loaning money. That's what that is. Even though they say buying, it's not. It's lending. But if they were able to just say buy corporate debt, even though people said the Fed has already bought corporate debt, they really didn't. They set up a lending facility which wasn't really technically legal, but because it was an exigent circumstance, they were able to do it. Well, then they sort of were able to buy corporate debt, but then they didn't. They showed like they were going to buy corporate debt. They funded it like they were going to buy corporate debt. They actually bought a little bit of corporate debt, but then all the market out there says, holy moly, the Fed is going to be buying corporate debt. And they jumped into the market ahead of the Federal Reserve thinking that they were going to be able to front run the Fed, and the Fed didn't have to do anything. All they had to do was just establish that credible threat that they were going to do it, prove that they were going to do it, and then the markets took over from there. This is something that's the Federal Reserve is, in fact, I found another article talking exactly about how the Federal Reserve is using their words to try and guide the market. It comes down to a Ben Bernanke speech given 20 years ago, where he talked about a gold machine and how that gold machine could produce as much gold at any given time. The moment that gold machine hit the market, or at least the news of that gold machine hitting the market, the price of gold on the market would plummet immediately, even before it even produces a single ounce of gold. Just the credible threat that there was a gold machine out there that could produce gold would be enough to manipulate the markets. And that's what they use all the time now. The Federal Reserve's favorite tool is jawboning, and I like to call them credible threats. Okay, guys, I'm going to go home and get something to eat. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.